Well, hello, brothers and sisters. It's Matthew Schanche here, formerly with Truth Matters and Amazing Discoveries. I've been getting a whole lot of questions about my status with the ministry and what's happened, and I've been having, honestly, a really difficult time trying to figure out exactly what to say and how to put everything. But this is my new channel. We're going to be exploring a whole lot of very, I believe, important and impactful things that are designed to help people find Christ for themselves. And we just don't have a lot of time to mess around. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to get done. And unfortunately, I have been removed from the ministry over differences in our religious beliefs. This has kind of been ongoing for a while, and I'm not saying that I'm right and they're wrong, or they're wrong and I'm right. It's just that we're just not seeing things eye to eye. And I'm going to clarify some of my views because I've actually had a pretty big impact on my own life with places where I speak. People are concerned that I hold some of the same views as AD. So this is going to be me sharing some of my beliefs and how they're slightly different than AD's, or in some cases a lot different than AD's, and basically share that I'm starting this new channel. And I have some information I think that people may want to hear when they're considering how to discern the real from the fake, the truth and the error. And I'm really hoping that with your support, we'll be able to continue this work in a way that can help impact people's lives. I want to continue carrying forward that type of work that was being done, which is providing evidence-based information, putting it together in a way that makes sense, that helps people get into action, get in a relationship with their Bible, get in a relationship with Jesus Christ, confessing our sins, asking for forgiveness, walking the walk of sanctification by faith, and hopefully preparing the people for what's coming. There's some very real things that I'm hoping to push at that will allow us to really get clear on the powers behind the scenes, who they control, how it all functions together to basically bring about the conditions for this final world system to occur. And that system, from my point of view, is one that will be headed by Satan appearing as Christ, who will enact the papacy and American Protestantism as the main entities by which the world is governed. It will be a Christianized world. And we're going to cover some of this as we review some of my my beliefs here. And I did this because I really wanted to show people just where I stand, so there's no confusion. And I'm just going to read these as statements and kind of share some thoughts on them as I read them. So that way, as we move forward, there's really no confusion about my stance on these views. And I'm also going to give some contact information for people who want to reach out after this, that if people have other additional questions, I'm pretty much an open book. So ask away and I'll do my best to answer. So these beliefs, again, these are just my own. Like, I really couldn't want to uphold God's God-given right of free will more. That is a fundamental right that I hold so dear. I even support the view that I respect the views of those who don't believe the same as I do, because I believe each individual has the right to think and choose for themselves. And the papacy and the beast system hates this perspective because it's kind of puts the rights of the individual above the rights of the common good. We're not going to get into that right now. But here are some of my views, and I'm sharing these specific ones because they represent a shift from where Amazing Discoveries kind of was to maybe where they are now, and how I align maybe with the old guard and maybe not so much the new. Again, I respect each person's right to think or choose for themselves. This is not me saying that I'm right or wrong, but I'm just sharing my beliefs based on the information as I understand it and have reviewed it. The first kind of topic I want to touch on is papacy and American Protestantism and not Islam. And I'm just going to read this and the next few and just kind of dialogue as we go along. It is my belief that the Bible and the spirit of prophecy make it clear that the primary entities to watch for at the end of time are the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. Ellen White wrote extensively about Satan impersonating Christ, the papacy and Protestantism unifying under a banner of spiritualism, all working together leading a Christianized world away from the truth of Scripture and God's holy law. She warned of a future where the world, united as one under Roman principles, enforces laws that are contrary to God's law and enforced through the power of the state. Yet, after an extensive review of both sides of the issues, I pose two questions. How many pages did Ellen White write about a future battle between the papacy and Islam? I contend there are none. How much did she write about Islam being used by God as the only instrument responsible for all 7 last plagues? I have seen nothing so far that would support this view. Now, this is more than just King of the North, King of the South conversations. This is Islam as the primary instrument, exclusive instrument, I should say, of all 7 last plagues. I have never seen a single page written about those things in the spirit of prophecy. Personally, I believe, and will provide content soon to support, that Islam is already under control of papal Rome, not the enemy of it. In an effort to deceive, the papacy is working to make it seem as though the American Protestant prophetic view, where Islam and Israel play a central role in end-time events, is accurate and unfolding in order to give the false prophet credibility. See, they're trying to make all this look like it's coming to fruition, the third temple and all of the elements between Israel and Palestine and Israel as a nation, a Zionist movement, I guess you could call, from the 1940s, which stems from the Rothschilds, which actually goes back to the days of the Templars, the original Templars. They're called Templars because they wanted to build the temple. We're going to get into that in the future. But the idea here is you create a false fulfillment of prophecy to give entities more credibility. And in this case, that's what's happening with the false prophet. I'll continue here. While Islam may indeed play a part, I believe and will put forth evidence to support that it is a part directed by Rome, not as an independent force acting outside the influence of the papacy. I stand with Walter Veith on the many positions that he puts forth in his lectures, Islamic Connection. And while this specific lecture has been removed from AD's official channels, given that it currently conflicts with the ministry's new views, it can still be found online. And I think those insights in there, as well as a handful of books and a number of, well, let's just say interesting pieces of evidence that I hope to put forth in the future that will really bring this whole thing together and should be considered when we're discussing Islam's prophetic role in comparison with the papacy, American Protestantism, and some of these other entities. Point number 2, quote, the torch of false prophecy. So this is stemming from a specific Ellen White quote that's being used to uphold a particular position. Let's take a look. The view has been put forth that anyone teaching the King of the North as the papacy is fulfilling the writings of Ellen White when she states that the, quote, torch of false prophecy, and here's the reference here, will be preached in the pulpits at the end of time. Additionally, this perspective implies that this statement by Sister White applies to anyone who does not teach using William Miller's rules to understand prophecy, or to anyone who does not use those rules to conclude the following: that Islam is the king of the north, that literal Egypt is the king of the south, that the caliphate is going to fight a future battle with the papacy over Jerusalem, and that Islam is responsible, as previously mentioned, for all 7 last plagues, acting as God's exclusive instrument in this capacity. So it's kind of using William Miller's rules, not just accepting those, which those rules are fine. They're great. You can use them. But if different people apply the same rules to the same book, oftentimes they still come up with different answers. And that's kind of to be the case here. So it's not just the William Miller rules, accepting or not teaching those that is the false torch, but it's to use those rules to arrive at these conclusions. While I respect the rights of those who choose to believe these outcomes, after a review of the evidence presented, I don't subscribe to or support these views. Given the highly unique nature of these specific conclusions and its requirements, the very application of them effectively renders all teachers, ministers, and pastors within the denomination, including views Amazing Discoveries has shared on these topics on its platform for the past 30 years, is now promoting false prophecy. So I don't hold these positions. I do agree that Ellen White made this statement. And as this further paragraph will say, I believe that there is a false torch of prophecy coming into our pulpits, but I understand when to apply to different topics. As it says here, to those in our midst who will reject the Sabbath, the doctrine on the state of the dead, the role of Jesus today in the most holy place and the investigative judgment, and the rejection of other pillars, and I'm not going to get into right now, rather than this being in relation to the acceptance or promotion of the papacy or the rejection of Islam in the capacity mentioned here. So I had a hard time accepting the idea that these conclusions, which are held by very few, in fact, some of them I have never heard anywhere else except inside of Amazing Discoveries recently. Like I've never seen or heard anybody teaching Islam is all 7 last plagues. So if everyone who doesn't accept that is promoting false prophecy, well then everybody seems to be promoting false prophecy except for, one group. And so I had challenges with that, and I just want to make it clear to others that I don't hold that position. Although I do respect the rights of people. I know there's people who believe King of the North is Islam and literal Egypt is the South. It's not even just about that. There's open dialogue on some of these points. It's taking it the next step further and saying everyone's teaching false prophecy who's not accepting that view. And even the people I talk to who accept Islam as the King of the North don't have Islam as all 7 last plagues or even necessarily a future battle with the papacy. In fact, if you ask 100 people who believe Islam is the King of the North what that means and questions about it, you generally get a lot of different answers. There's very little consistency even among them. Now, I'm not saying that means that it's true or not true. It's more just inferring that I don't think we can be applying the torch of false prophecy to basically anyone who's not teaching these very niche, specific views. I'm willing to be wrong on this. These are just my convictions, and this is just what I believe. To that end, we'll continue. The 2300 and not the 2520. So I support the view that the 2300-day year prophecy is the longest time prophecy identified by both the Bible and the Spirit of prophecy. I also believe, and will present materials in the future, that the 7 times found in Leviticus 26, like the whole basis for the 2520, refers to an intensity in judgment and not a day-year time prophecy. It doesn't fit the principles. It doesn't fit the rules that apply to where time prophecies fit. And I'm going to kind of show in the future my perspective on why that is the case. And I'm going to give an example here too. Additionally, there is a notion among 2520 proponents. I've heard this given to me as a claim many times for the validity of 2520. So I'm just sharing one example that claims the 2300-day prophecy lacks a second witness. So this is the idea that everything be established out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, that everything needs to be witnessed by another element, that the 1260 years is witnessed by the 3.5 reference, as well as that reference being 42 months in another place. We see it has multiple places that it's verified and confirmed, but that the 2300 days lacks that second witness. So I'll continue here. And that this is often argued that the 2520 prophecy is of equal importance and that both are needed to establish each other. However, this issue, along with many others proposed by 2520 promoters, I believe is easily addressed and will show the 2300 days do not require the 2520 for validation. And I'm just going to share what I believe the second witness is. The second witness for the 2300 days is the 70 weeks of Daniel 9. It's that prophecy that provides the start date for the 2300 days. So if you needed a witness for 2300 days, what better witness is it than an additional prophecy that is actually used as the start date for the larger prophecy? Daniel 8 and 9 connected, and we're going to continue to deep dive into that because so few truly understand how important that 2300 days is. Most of the world is interpreting Daniel 9 in the 70 weeks, not even realizing that it's connected to the 2300 days. While again, I respect the rights of those who choose to believe in the 2520, this is not about me saying if they're right or wrong. It's just what I believe. I see it as non-essential to the work of preparing people for the true and false second comings. My focus remains on the clear prophetic timeline given through Scripture and spirit of prophecy, that's dragon, beast, and false prophet, without adding elements that I believe aren't critical to our understanding of end-time events. That's exactly how I feel on the 2520 matter. Now, here's where it kind of takes the next, I think, step too far. For me, again, I'm just sharing my beliefs. Sabbath salvational, the 2520 is not. I have not seen any strong evidence to suggest the acceptance of the 2520 doctrine is salvational, but there are some who have. Along with the rejection of the premise of the 2520 as a day-year time prophecy, I also reject the idea that the acceptance of the 2520 doctrine is a matter of salvation on par with the Sabbath at the end of time. I believe the Sabbath is the clear doctrinal line in the sand that all will need to choose between in the end. But I do not believe that the acceptance of the 2520 doctrine will also be made a central focus in the last days as a necessary condition for salvation. I'm willing to change my position. All I'm saying is that at this stage, I do not subscribe to this view in comparison to where AD now sits on this topic. And as I say here, after thoroughly reviewing the information presented in support of the claim that accepting the 2520 doctrine is a salvational matter, I found the evidence to be scarce, suspect, and in conflict with other established pillars of our faith that define the biblical requirements for salvation in our church. That's exactly what happened. I was a neutral observer. I'm willing to listen and consider anything, because I believe that it's very important that we never just rest on what we know to be true. If it's true, it should stand any test of scrutiny. So I'm okay with people bringing ideas and concepts that they believe are in harmony with scriptures and testing it with what we know. But this particular issue, I have found no evidence, no compelling evidence that would establish this or give us the grounds to add conditions to the requirements for salvation. So that's very important. In my view, one of the last things that really caused a split between myself and the views of Amazing Discoveries was the understanding that they held this position, that the 2520 is salvational, and for those who have heard it and rejected it, that it could cost them their salvation. And here I am, like I have heard and listened for the last several years the position on this, and I can't accept it. So now my whole salvation is put into question. You can imagine how that would put a strain on any relationship. But again, this is not trying to say that I'm right or wrong or they are right or wrong. It's more just saying this is the nature of the differences, and these are my beliefs. Armageddon, spiritual and literal. There is a belief among those who advocate for a literal battle of Armageddon in the literal valley of Megiddo that much of the disagreement over this issue stems on how people interpret spiritual versus literal in their applications of these prophetic events. They argue that identifying the king of the north as a religious system, and papal religious system, and the king of the south as secularism, as two separate entities, in Daniel 40 through 45 is a spiritual interpretation and therefore invalid. So the idea that because we've made secularism, like atheism, which is like this non-tangible literal thing, this now king of the south is not really king of the south, it's just kind of like this concept that's spiritualizing it away, therefore it's invalid. So in their view, in the contrasting view, Islam and Egypt as literal entities, because Turkey, I should say, and Egypt are physical locations that are north and south of each other, that when you follow the line in Daniel 11, that breaking that and making it papal and secularism or atheism breaks the literal translation to this. And because of this, those people tend to take Armageddon and apply that same principle, that anybody who says that Armageddon is not a more global conflict over the word of God, those who choose to follow it and those who don't, it turns in, because it has to be literal, a more classical war-style conflict in the literal Valley of Megiddo. And oddly enough, that puts us squarely on the same ground as what the false prophet believes. I'm going to touch on that another time. And this is some of my concerns is more of these views are moving more towards the same territory as the false prophet. I know people will say, oh, well, they're trying to cover it with the truth. So therefore, like a lot of the things they believe are based in truth, they're just wrong application. But I'm going to contend some other thoughts and feelings on that. I believe, however, that distinction between spiritual or literal is fundamentally flawed. I intend to present information in the near future that shares the concept that the spiritual is also literal. For example, today, I think if you ask general Adventists, they would say we're spiritual Israel, that it's not the physical people in the Middle East, in the physical location of Israel, let's say, that are a nation because they, stemmed from the bloodlines of Abraham. But more of after the gospel went to the world, now it's anybody who believes God and does his will, follows his way, keeps his commandments, acts as Christ acts, becomes more like Christ the more they behold him. And then through faith, which is the true covenant, through faith, then they became grafted into the vine, so to speak. And when that transfer happened, now that it's not like local and it's now global, it was before a local geographical, now it's global. Anyone who believes the covenant and follows God through faith is part of it. Now we can start to see that this spiritual Israel has literal people. It's made up, its spiritual identity consists of living people in the world today. So the spiritual is the literal. Spiritual Israel is made up of literal people. I don't think anyone would argue that. The heavenly sanctuary is both a spiritual and literal reality. The papacy is both a spiritual entity, which is like fighting a war against the mind of the people, but also is taking the place of God, like saying they can forgive sins, saying they're God on earth, saying they can change the word, saying they can change the Sabbath, like all of these things. Like those are spiritual things, but they're literally happening. They're happening to us. They're coming down the chain of power to be infused into our world, whether it's through like Climate Sunday initiatives or, the Supreme Court, 7 of 9 justices having a Catholic worldview. It bleeds into our culture. The spiritual becomes the literal through that. And I'm gonna do a presentation either in this video, or if this gets too long, I may just do it as a separate one, showing why this spiritual and literal are the same and why that's such a relevant distinction to have when you're considering all of these different issues: Armageddon, King of the North, King of the South, 7 last plagues, Islam's role in everything. I think it becomes very important to understand when we know who the powers are, to look at what they're doing and saying and see if we can discern something in that. And I think you guys will be interested to learn some of the stuff in the presentation that I'll show after this. Okay, so the heavenly sanctuary is both spiritual and literal. The papacy is a spiritual entity and literal. Secularism, while a spiritual force, also manifests in very literal ways in our schools, families, governments, and media, all of which openly mock God and his son. And that's the reality we're faced with today, and what I'm going to touch on in the next piece here is how much the real battle is with LGBTQ, gender identification, a lot of what would be called the woke agenda items, is a very real battle. It's spiritual in that it's literally our children's minds are being fought over. And for those families or people who don't have God at the center, like we're seeing what's happening. Even with families with God at the center, these challenges can be there. So like that war, though spiritual, is very literally happening. And I think when I show you guys what the false prophet is talking about and who they're fighting, who they say their enemy is, what cause they're using as why we need the 10 Commandments back in schools and government and all these things, I think it's going to be very revealing. So the application of Armageddon, in my view, is spiritual, literal, and global, representing something far greater than just a man-made weapon-based conflict in the specific geographical location of Megiddo. I'm going to share more information on this in the future. And this will be my final belief that I share for this particular video. And it's in relation to the Nashville Eclipse series that was released, I believe, last year. And I'll just read this statement on it because I think it's best to just keep on track here. After the Nashville video series was released, I encountered significant backlash regarding the views presented in the series at every church I visited there afterwards. Literally, every time I would speak at a new church or a new event, someone would come up to me afterwards and ask me about this Nashville Eclipse series and what my role was in it and how I felt about it. So I want to be clear. I was not involved in any aspect of that production and played absolutely no role in creating that series. I was focused on developing new Truth Matters episodes, and that was something that was just the ministry decided to do on its own. I don't share the views expressed in the series concerning Islam's potential involvement of bombing the city of Nashville. I don't agree with the statements made about the slavery and human trafficking in Nashville, or the quite a few number of inaccuracies about the very eclipse itself. It didn't even go over Nashville. The flight path was totally different. There were so many elements about it that I just wanted to make it clear that I played no part in that. And for people who are considering having me maybe come share at their churches or at local events, that I was not part of any part of those series in a way that, as I've heard pastors and others who have come to me with these concerns before, were concerned with. So I hope that clears it up. I'll just finish saying this is not to claim that my perspective is definitively right or wrong, but simply to clarify that I do not align with AD's stances on these matters. The fact that the series resonated mainly with evangelical Christians, which is like a big selling point for the ministry, thinking that this was a good video, that it resonated so much with evangelical, in my view, that raises more concerns than it does confirm that it's true. But may each person be convicted in their own mind after studying the scriptures, searching them for themselves. Like, that's the whole point of this, is to say, like, you've got to dig deep. If you want to know the truth and you don't want to be deceived, you got to dig deep. I'm happy to share my perspective. They can share theirs. Others can share theirs on theirs. But it's up to you, each of you, to define what your criteria is. And the more it's aligned with the Bible, I think the more clear it becomes. So that leaves me with what I want to cover next. And I don't think I'm going to do it in this video. I think what I'm hoping is that this message will get out, that we're going to continue doing this work, that there's some very important things happening that I want to share with people. And this is one example. What was happening was I was trying my best to keep up to speed with everything, connecting the dots, just like what Truth Matters was all about. And I was finding more and more information that was showing something was happening, but because the information was counter to some of the new views at AD, I literally couldn't share the information. And that was really hard for me personally, because I think it's so important to, like, again, if it's the truth, just to throw the full weight of scrutiny at it. Let both sides exist. Let us reason together. Let us put them together and see, maybe find if there's some combination of them that are real. But unfortunately, that accommodation couldn't be made. And now I have to come out and share some of what I found. And this was going to be, done a little bit earlier, but because the last few months have been really difficult in trying to figure out how we're going to move forward, I have not been able to share it. And by sharing some of this information, I don't really know what's going to happen to me as a result. My concern is getting the information out to people so that they can understand it, be aware of it, and hopefully not be getting taken in the tide of back and forth, because it's getting really hard to maybe discern what the reality is behind all of this stuff. And I'm really hoping that this particular presentation will show who American Protestantism is saying that they're fighting, who is the enemy of American Protestantism by their own words, and showing how that aligns with the Bible and the spirit of prophecy in a way that I think it makes it very, very clear. And it centralizes around the French Revolution, secularism or atheism that was born out of that, and the false prophet today. Now, I want to continue this work. I want to continue sharing and allowing the impactful information to reach people by the power of the Holy Spirit. I don't believe that it's me or anything that I'm doing special, other than just trying to use the real world information to show people that the Bible's true. Jesus really is the only way to God, that there are criteria that we are responsible in our own walks with God to try to overcome the things we know aren't against him. But the reality is, I can't do this work without you guys. And I have tried to make giving as easy as possible. I really think that we're much stronger together than apart. So even if a small percentage of people who see this video feel called to just give something, the work can continue. Because I have been let go from Amazing Discoveries over these differences, I have not had an income now for quite some time. And the Lord has blessed us and kept us through this time. But the reality is, my ability to continue doing this is totally based on who hears this and answers the call. Because I think that we are on the precipice of some major changes happening. And if God allows, I want to continue showing powerful information that can help people see the truth from the fake. So I have international options. I have American and Canadian options. If people think of other ways that they want to try to support, I've left some contact information here. You have my YouTube, my X account, as well as an email that I can be reached. And I'm really hoping that people who have been moved by this information will be moved to continue working together to continue moving this work forward. It's really just the beginning. There's so much to uncover. There's so much to unfold, and I'm really hopeful to share more with everybody in the future. But for now, I ask for your prayers. I will be praying for each person to hear this message and to be called to move in partnership to bring this work to more people, to show them the truth that we have here. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful and privileged to be able to share this information with you. It's been an honor to be able to serve in this capacity. I've been impacted tremendously by the people's feedback, by your stories, people I've met who have been impacted by the work that's been done. And my life's been changed by it. So I hope that we can continue together to move this work forward, and that that the Lord might provide a path for us to be unified again, reconciled through his Son, that we might be ready for his soon coming. God bless you all, and I will be seeing you very soon.